She was trembling, pen hovering over the bankruptcy papers, eyes glassy from the whiskey she'd poured to escape the collapse of her empire. And then he appeared. One steady hand, one life-saving move, and he stopped her from destroying everything. The next morning, she stared at him like she remembered everything. But what was she really thinking? If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow Lucas and I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one. You don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. Lucas Bennett had gotten used to waking up before the sun. It wasn't discipline, it was survival. By 5:15 a.m., he was already packing Sophie's lunch while she sat at the small dining table, drawing shapes on a scrap of paper. The kitchen light flickered, humming faintly. He'd promised himself he'd fix it soon, but promises were cheap when money was tight. "Daddy," Sophie said softly, "you forgot the juice box again." Lucas paused, blinking awake properly, then chuckled under his breath. Right. Juice box. The most important part. He slipped one into her lunch bag and ruffled her hair. Moments like these anchored him. No matter how chaotic work got or how demanding the company became, Sophie grounded him. By 6:20 a.m., he dropped her off with the neighbor who helped with school runs, and he was on the bus heading into the city. He checked his phone. Payment reminders, an overdue bill, a text from his landlord asking when he could discuss matters. He swallowed. Today wasn't the day. The building where he worked, Vale Dynamics, stood like a glass monolith in the center of downtown. Clean lines, perfect symmetry, exactly the way its CEO liked things. Adriana Vale. Most employees only saw her during quarterly meetings or when she swept through the halls with her assistants in tow. Poised, polished, expression unreadable. She didn't walk, she glided, like she didn't have time to touch the ground. Everyone stood straighter when she passed, even if she didn't look at them. Lucas rarely crossed paths with her, except in glimpses, her heels clicking sharply, her posture a blade of confidence, her perfume cutting subtly through the air, like understated luxury. He'd never spoken more than 2 polite phrases to her. She was in a different universe. Raw pressure, relentless expectations, the weight of an empire on her shoulders. But today, something felt off. The moment Lucas walked into the operations floor, he could feel a strange tension stirring. People whispered, screens showed plummeting figures. A team from the finance wing hurried towards the elevators with tight faces. He frowned. Not again. "Morning, Lucas," said a coworker, Elena, as she passed. "Hope you're ready. They said the new projections are bad, like really bad." "Bad how?" She shook her head. "Like, bad enough the CEO hasn't left her office in 2 days. Not even for the board meeting last night." Lucas stopped walking. Adriana Vale missing a board meeting? That didn't happen. She wasn't just a leader. She was a force, unyielding, controlled, precise. Even when the company faced storms, she was the eye of them. But storms change people. Lucas clocked in, grabbed a stack of reports that needed confirming by noon, and tried to focus. But the whispers didn't stop. Neither did the nervous glances at the locked top-floor elevator that led to the executive suite. Around 11:30, his supervisor rushed down the hallway. "Bennett," she said, breathless, "I need you on the 18th floor, now." Lucas blinked. "Ma'am, that's the executive level, yes." She exhaled heavily. "They need someone who can stay calm, someone Miss Vale won't snap at." I almost laughed. "If she's calling for anyone, it's definitely not me." "She didn't call for you," her supervisor said bluntly. "Security did." That, well, was worse. Still, he followed. His stomach tightened as the elevator climbed past the normal floors he belonged to. When the doors opened, the difference in atmosphere hit him instantly. Rich wood paneling, soft lighting,
Silence, thick as velvet. Everything is expensive enough to equal a year of his salary for a single table. But something else hung in the air too. Something heavy, like exhaustion soaked into the walls. A security guard approached him quietly. "Bennett?" "Yeah." "Good. We need someone to help with, well," he hesitated, lowering his voice. "She hasn't left her office all night. Someone needs to check on her. The board is freaking out." Lucas frowned. "Why me?" "Because you're calm, and you're not afraid of people." "I am absolutely afraid of her." "Sure," the guard said, "but you hide it better than the rest." He didn't get a chance to argue. A soft thud echoed from down the hall. The guard's eyes widened. That came from her office. The two of them rushed down the carpeted hallway. Lucas's pulse quickened. He imagined her collapsed on the floor, overworked, hurt, or... They approached the tall glass double doors of Adriana Vale's office. The blinds were half drawn, shadows moving behind them. The guard swiped his badge, pushed the door open, and Lucas froze. Adriana Vale was sitting on the floor. Not collapsed, not unconscious, just on the floor, leaning against her desk, hair slightly loosened from its usual perfect shape, her blazer discarded, a half-empty decanter of whiskey beside it. Her eyes lifted slowly, and for the first time, Lucas saw her, not the CEO, not the Ice Queen, not the legend. Just a young woman trying not to break. Her gaze drifted over the guard dismissively, but stopped on Lucas, locking onto him with a strange, foggy intensity. "You," she murmured. He pointed at himself, stunned. "Me?" "Yes," she whispered. "Come here." The guard stepped back immediately. Too quickly. Lucas forced himself forward. "Ms. Vale, are you okay?" She let out a soft laugh, half bitter, half delirious. "No, but that isn't new. Do you know what is new?" "No, ma'am." She reached up, hand trembling slightly, grabbed a thick folder from her desk, and dropped it into his lap. "Bankruptcy," she said softly. "My signature. All it needs is one stroke of my pen." She smiled faintly, a smile that didn't belong on someone like her. "Isn't that funny?" Lucas stared at her, stunned, his breath catching. She wasn't just tipsy, she was drunk. Drunk enough to ruin everything. His heart pounded. This wasn't a moment between the CEO and the employee. This was a person unraveling. A person nobody else dared to stop. And somehow, she had chosen him. If you were Lucas, would you step in or stay out of it? What would you do if your boss were about to destroy everything without realizing it? Tell me in the comments.
Lucas had never felt tension like this, not even on the day Sophie was born, and the doctor whispered the word complications. This was a different kind of pressure. Cold, sharp, dangerously fragile. Adriana Vale leaned back against the desk leg, the soft glow from the city filtering through the blinds and striping her face with slanted gold. It highlighted the exhaustion etched into her features, the hollow beneath her eyes, the faint tremble in her hands, the emotional cracks she had worked so hard to hide. "Lucas." She said his name like she'd been holding it for hours. He swallowed. She definitely remembered him, but not in the formal, distant way of a CEO addressing staff. It felt personal. Too personal. He steadied his voice. "Ma'am, this document, bankruptcy," she whispered again, tapping the folder with his shaky finger. "It's the end. The final bow. The moment my father warned me the night before he died." Her eyes glistened. He said, "Adriana, leadership is only beautiful when you're winning, but when you're losing, it eats you." Lucas knelt slowly beside her. Not close, just near enough that she wouldn't feel abandoned. He could smell the whiskey, sweet and smoky under her perfume. The room is suddenly too warm, too quiet. "You're not losing," he said carefully. She laughed, bitter and low. "You saw the numbers downstairs. Everyone has." Her head dropped back against the desk, "And now the board thinks I can't handle pressure. They were right. I'm tired, Lucas." Hearing her say his name again made something in his chest tighten. She never said anyone's name. She barely acknowledged anyone unless it was strategic. But right now the strategy was dead on the floor next to the whiskey. She reached for the pen lying near her hip. Her fingers missed. She reached again, slower, almost defeated. Lucas's breath stopped as he saw the pen inch toward that folder. "Ms. Vale," he said, voice firming, "this document." "You think I'm drunk," she whispered. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. She smirked faintly, the expression collapsing into something sad. "You're right. I am. And I hate it. I hate that this is the only moment I've had to breathe in months." Another reach for the pen. Lucas acted without thinking. His hand closed over hers, soft, warm, trembling. Her breath hitched, so subtle he almost missed it. "Please don't," he said quietly. "This isn't you, and tomorrow you'll regret it." He felt her pulse racing under his fingertips. For a long moment they didn't move. Her gaze drifted to their hands, his calloused palm over her elegant, manicured fingers. Their worlds are physically touching for the first time. Something shifted in her expression, something he couldn't name. "Funny," she murmured. "I thought you hated me." Lucas blinked. "What?" "I don't. You avoid my floor. You don't look at me unless you have to. Even now, you're talking to me like I'm glass about to break." Her voice softened. "Do you think I'm fragile, Lucas Bennett?" He exhaled. Careful, measured. "I think," he said, "you're human, and you're under more pressure than anyone should face alone." Her lips parted slightly. For the first time, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone who had been carrying too much for too long. She leaned her head to the side, studying him. "Why are you helping me?" He could have lied. He could have said it was his job, or company loyalty, or protocol. Instead, because nobody else will. And because you deserve better than this. The silence that followed was thick, charged. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Then a whisper. "Scoot a little closer." His heartbeat spiked. He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. She let out a tiny, humorless laugh. "See? Even now, you're afraid of me." "No," Lucas murmured. He did move closer. Just an inch. Her breathing unsteady, she lifted the pen again, not toward the document, but toward him. She held it out like an offering. "Take it," she said softly. "Why?" "So I can't ruin everything." Her voice cracked. Barely, but enough to melt any distance he had been trying to keep. Lucas slowly took the pen from her fingers, and the moment it left her hand, her shoulders sagged, as if letting go of something heavy. She exhaled shakily. "Thank you." He nodded, relieved. "Let's get you up. You need water and rest." But when he reached for her arm, she didn't pull away. She let him steady her, leaning into him slightly, her hair brushing his jaw as she rose. His breath faltered. Her voice came out soft, slurred, painfully honest. "Lucas, don't tell them. Please. I can't survive another humiliation." He looked down at her, at the fear she didn't bother to hide. "I won't," he said. "You have my word." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand why someone like him, someone she barely noticed until today, was choosing to protect her. "Why are you so—" She stopped. Couldn't finish. He didn't ask her to. He helped her sit on the couch near the window, waited until she steadied, then tossed the pen into his pocket before she could reach for it again. She watched him do it, and for the first time, she smiled. A small, tired, grateful smile. "Of all the people in this company, you're the last one I thought would save me." Lucas swallowed. He didn't know what to say to that. He just knew this moment wasn't leaving either of them unchanged. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. He stayed with her until she fell asleep, head resting against the couch cushion, breathing softly, lashes trembling like she was still fighting invisible battles. When he left her office, the pen was still in his pocket. He had no idea how much that single decision would change. Everything.
The next morning, Lucas arrived at Vale Dynamics earlier than usual. The elevator ride felt heavier than yesterday, the city sun filtering through glass but somehow failing to warm the nerves tightening in his chest. His phone buzzed once. Sophie's cheerful, "Good morning, Daddy," text. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach the pit of tension in his stomach. He kept thinking of Adriana Vale, stunning, fragile, human. The memory of her hand trembling in his still haunted him, and yet he couldn't let it interfere with his work. Not today. Not ever. He walked through the operations floor, trying to focus on spreadsheets, numbers, and projections, but whispers followed him. Some employees had noticed the odd tension yesterday, a nervous glance here, a smirk there. Lucas avoided eye contact. He didn't want gossip. Then came the elevator ding. Adriana Vale stepped in, heels clicking like sharp metronomes. She was immaculate, blazer pressed, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. The Adriana of the world was expected on the top floor. Had Adriana Lucas seen it yesterday? Gone. Her eyes briefly met his, but the contact was fleeting. She didn't smile. She didn't acknowledge the moment they'd shared. Lucas tried to focus on the work briefing, but her presence made it impossible. His stomach twisted each time she passed. And yet, she acted as though yesterday had never happened. Pretending was her armor. He understood, but it hurt anyway. She sent him perfectly professional emails requesting reports, signatures, and decisions. Not a word about yesterday. The professional mask. And Lucas found himself resisting the urge to break it, to ask her why she hadn't mentioned it, why she hadn't even glanced at him properly. Mid-morning, Lucas's coworker, Amir, sidled up to him. "Are you okay?" Amir whispered. "Something happened yesterday?" Lucas shrugged. "Nothing you need to know." "Really?" Amir raised an eyebrow. "Because everyone's talking about how the CEO—" "Stop," Lucas muttered. "Just stop." He couldn't tell anyone, not even Sophie, not a word. It was her private battle, and he wasn't about to let it become office gossip. Meanwhile, Adriana struggled too. Pretending she had forgotten Lucas's intervention was almost easier than admitting she had needed him. Pride and shame warred inside her like wild horses. She hated vulnerability, hated the idea that someone she barely knew had seen her at her lowest. And yet, every time she saw Lucas, she felt the pull of yesterday. Gratitude, embarrassment, something else she couldn't name. She sat in her office after lunch, staring at the chair where he'd steadied her, tracing an invisible line across the leather cushion. The pen, still in his pocket, was a phantom she could almost feel in her own hand. She shook her head and buried herself in spreadsheets and emails. Focus, control, pretend nothing happened. And yet, she glanced at the door every few minutes, hoping he'd come by, and hoping nothing. Confusion gnawed at her. By afternoon, Lucas found himself walking past her office. He stopped, hand hovering over the door handle, fingers trembling slightly. Should he? No, that would be awkward, unprofessional. He forced himself to keep walking, telling himself it was nothing, just another day. The resistance became a silent war. Words left unsaid, emotions trapped behind polite nods and measured greetings. Each knew the other remembered, each knew the other felt it, but neither would acknowledge it. Lucas buried himself in files long after the team had left. The tension wasn't just hers, it was his too. Protecting her pulled him into a world he hadn't wanted to touch, the fragility behind a mask of control. Yet he couldn't escape the echo of her hand in his, the way her voice had sounded when she whispered, "Don't tell them." And Adriana? She lingered in meetings, the perfect executive, every smile carefully measured, every word precise. But in private moments, alone at her desk, she replayed yesterday. Over and over, her vulnerability, his steadiness, his calm that filled the space she couldn't manage herself. She hated needing him. She hated how much she wanted to. By the end of the day, both were exhausted. They had fought the moment in different ways, he by avoidance, she by perfection. Yet the invisible thread connecting them grew taut, almost painfully so, stretching across silence, unspoken emotions, and mutual denial. Walking out of the building, Lucas paused by the elevators. The reflection of himself in the polished metal reminded him he was holding back too much. He wanted to ask her, "Why didn't you pretend to forget?" But he didn't. Adriana, from her corner office, watched him leave. She wanted to call him back, to tell him the truth of her gratitude, the vulnerability she couldn't mask. But pride and fear stopped her fingers from dialing his extension. She sank back into her chair, staring at the city lights. Pretending was easier. The world outside didn't know. The office didn't know. But both of them did. And that unacknowledged truth, the tension between what happened and what they let themselves feel, set the stage for the next collision, one neither could avoid.
The next morning, a crisis hit Vale Dynamics like a bolt from the blue. A critical client threatened to pull out of a multi-million-dollar contract because of errors in last week's proposal. The error wasn't Lucas's, wasn't even Adriana's, but it demanded immediate attention. The board convened an emergency meeting, and the only solution was to fix the mistake together before the client could respond. And that meant one thing. Lucas and Adriana had no choice but to spend the day in the same room, strategizing side by side. Lucas arrived early, carrying his laptop, reports, and a sense of apprehension he couldn't shake. The conference room was stark and imposing. Polished table, high-back chairs, glass walls overlooking the city. Adriana was already there, seated with her laptop open, fingers tapping rapidly on the keyboard. Her posture was rigid, precise, immaculate. For a moment, Lucas froze in the doorway. The Adriana of yesterday, the vulnerable, trembling woman, was gone, replaced by the Adriana Vale everyone feared. But she glanced up, and her eyes softened slightly when they met his. "Glad you made it," she said, voice clipped but not unkind. Lucas nodded, careful. "I wouldn't miss it." She returned to her laptop, but a flicker in her gaze betrayed awareness of his presence. She didn't pretend she had forgotten yesterday anymore. She didn't comment, leaving Lucas to navigate the strange space between distance and intimacy. The morning hours passed in tense collaboration. Every so often, Adriana would pause mid-sentence, and Lucas would catch a subtle sigh, a wearied slump of her shoulders, a fleeting glance at the pen he had rescued her from the day before.
She never mentioned it, but he felt its weight like a quiet reminder hovering over them. At one point, the printer jammed. Papers flew across the table. Adriana muttered an expletive under her breath, and Lucas, instinctively, bent down to help. Their hands brushed, brief but deliberate, and both flinched slightly. "You're everywhere today," she said, trying to sound stern, but failing. Her voice had a tremor he caught instantly. "I'm helping," Lucas replied cautiously. She glanced at him, a smirk hovering at the edge of her lips. "You always have that calm, like nothing phases you. It's called survival." She laughed, quiet and short, almost a whisper. And then the tension cracked, just a little. By mid-afternoon, the client's response was urgent. They demanded a corrected proposal before 5 p.m. Panic simmered under Adriana's controlled exterior. Lucas noticed the small tells she tried to hide, tapping her foot, a slight frown, and a hand repeatedly brushing her hair. He leaned closer to point at a spreadsheet. "Adriana, take a breath." She met his gaze, sharp but tired. "I can't afford to panic. You can't afford it either," he said softly, holding her eyes. "But panic doesn't help. It never has." She studied him, searching for weakness, judgment, anything that would remind her she was still a CEO, still in control. But there was none, just calm, steady insistence, a subtle kindness she hadn't expected, and didn't want to. The hours stretched. They went through the proposal line by line, correcting errors and recalculating projections. Each correction was accompanied by a quiet exchange, sometimes a glance, sometimes a murmured agreement. Every accidental touch of hands on a shared paper, every brush of fingers over the keyboard sent unspoken messages they couldn't articulate. And yet neither addressed it. Force of habit, pride, fear. Around 4:30, Adriana's laptop battery died. Lucas offered his charger, and as she plugged it in, their shoulders brushed. She froze, then forced herself to continue typing. He wanted to apologize for invading her space, but couldn't. Instead, he focused on the work, as if the proximity didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than either of them wanted to admit. As the clock ticked toward 5 p.m., their collaboration took on an almost intimate rhythm. Lines were corrected, sentences reworded, and numbers checked. Every correction, every suggestion carried more than professional weight. It carried a shared understanding that yesterday had changed everything, whether they liked it or not. Finally, Lucas leaned back, exhaustion lining his features. "We did it." Adriana looked at him, expression unreadable, then a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "We did it." For a heartbeat, the world outside, the city, the office, the pressure, faded. Two people, bound by circumstance, by necessity, by unspoken history, shared a fragile victory. And in that fragile victory lay a subtle, unacknowledged connection, a bond forming in the cracks of pride and circumstance. Lucas realized he could leave the office now, and nothing would have changed professionally, but everything had changed emotionally. He felt it in the way her eyes lingered for a moment longer than necessary, the way her fingers brushed against a pen he handed her, the way she exhaled softly when the work was done. Adriana Vale realized the same. She had faced him all day, working side by side, and yet had never had to pretend she was unaffected. Not fully, not in the quiet moments, the near touches, the shared breaths. It was dangerous, and she knew it. After the frantic push to finish the client's corrected proposal, the office had finally emptied. The city skyline beyond glowed with the late afternoon sun, painting the conference room in golds and amber. Lucas leaned back in his chair, stretching,
trying to shake the lingering tension. Adriana sat across from him, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the city beyond the glass. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable but charged, like an electric field, humming with what had happened yesterday and what had just transpired today. Finally, Adriana broke it. "You know," she began, almost as if testing the words in the air, "I've always thought I had to carry everything myself." Her hands gripped the edge of the table, nails tracing the wood. "Mistakes, crises, failures. No one can handle it but me." Lucas listened quietly, sensing the vulnerability behind the polished voice. He didn't interrupt. She needed to speak, not be corrected. "My father," she continued softly, "he built this company from nothing. He made me believe I could do the same, that I had to do the same. And when he died," she faltered, "I had no one to teach me how to be human again, only the CEO." Lucas nodded slowly, empathy stirring. He had learned to read her hidden cracks, the subtle tremors, the micro-expressions, the fleeting hesitation in her gestures. He knew she wasn't just powerful. She was exhausted. She was human. She was alone. I know what it's like to feel like you're carrying the world on your shoulders, not with a company, but with everything else. Bills, responsibilities, a little person counting on you." He smiled faintly, thinking of Sophie. "It's a different kind of pressure, but it breaks you in the same way." Her gaze flicked toward him, curious. "You have a little girl?" Lucas nodded, a small warmth in his eyes. "Sophie, she's everything, and sometimes terrifyingly honest about it." He chuckled softly. "I get no breaks." Adriana's lips curved into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. "Sounds familiar," she said, almost to herself. She leaned back in her chair, letting the tension slip from her shoulders just a fraction. "I suppose none of us ever really get breaks, do we?" "No," Lucas said, "but some of us get people who help carry the weight, even a little." She stared at him, considering the weight in his words. Then, almost accidentally, she knocked over a small decorative frame on the table, a picture of her father holding her as a child. Lucas bent to pick it up. Your dad?" he asked gently. She nodded, taking the frame from him. "He was everything I had. And then, nothing. Sometimes I wonder if I became a CEO to prove I could survive, not to succeed." Her voice was raw, softer than he had ever heard. Lucas set the frame carefully back on the table, sensing her fragility. "That's a lot to carry alone." She exhaled, a breath she didn't realize she was holding. I didn't mean to let you see me like that yesterday. Drunk, fragile, a mess. You were human," Lucas said simply, "and that's okay." Her eyes flicked up at him, searching his expression, looking for judgment, ridicule, anything. She found none, only quiet understanding. There was a pause. Then, almost like a confession, she added, "You make it sound easier than it is." Lucas's chest tightened. "It's never easy, but it matters who's there with you." Adriana's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, the wall she had built around herself cracked. She didn't lean forward or reach out yet, but she didn't turn away either. That was progress. Small, fragile, but real. In return, Lucas allowed a small glimpse of his own vulnerability. "I lost my wife 2 years ago.
Sophie and we had to rebuild from nothing. Every day is hard, but somehow it works." Adriana's lips parted slightly, as if to speak, then closed. She wasn't sure how to respond. There were no words for the mix of admiration, empathy, and something else she felt toward him. A soft, accidental laugh escaped her. "So we're both broken in our own ways." Lucas chuckled, the sound low and sincere. "Yeah, guess we are." She tilted her head, studying him carefully. "And yet, somehow, you keep going. Calm, steady. You carry it. I carry it for Sophie. She doesn't get a choice." Silence fell again, but it was different this time. Comfortable, shared, charged with unspoken understanding. Then, she did something unexpected. She leaned forward slightly, placing a hand on the table close to his, not touching him, not yet. Just close enough to acknowledge that she trusted him, that she felt a connection she hadn't allowed herself to feel with anyone else in years. Lucas noticed. He didn't move, didn't speak, but he felt it, a fragile bond forming in the quiet honesty of shared pain. "Thank you," she whispered, almost lost in the hum of the city beyond the glass. "For what?" "For not letting me fall yesterday, and for being here today." Lucas met his gaze. "You don't have to thank me. It's the right thing to do." She studied him, searching for hidden motives. Finding none, she let out a long breath. "I think I've forgotten what it's like to have someone care. Like this, without judgment." Lucas gave a small, gentle smile. "Maybe it's time you remembered." And for the first time, they both allowed themselves to acknowledge something deeper than professional obligation. The walls of pride and pretense had cracks now. Vulnerability had entered their shared space, and with it, a tentative, fragile trust.
The office had emptied again, the golden glow of late afternoon fading into the soft blues and purples of evening. Lucas remained at his desk, going over final notes for the corrected client proposal, while Adriana stayed in the conference room, reviewing the same documents. The silence between them was no longer tense. It carried a quiet comfort, as if the day's crisis had stripped away layers of pretense, leaving something raw but honest. "Lucas," she called softly, almost shyly, "why don't you take a break? You've been here all day." He glanced up, caught off guard. "I can't," he said, trying to sound casual. "There's still some final verification I want to do." Adriana studied him carefully, noting the weariness etched in his face. Then, in a rare break from her usual controlled self, she smiled, a small, mischievous curve of her lips. "You know," she said, leaning back in her chair, "for a single dad who's supposed to be calm under pressure, you look like you're about to collapse." He blinked, caught off guard by the humor. Well, maybe I need to be more dramatic to impress you." Her laughter, soft and genuine, filled the room. It was the first time Lucas had heard it in full, without the steel of authority masking her. Something in her mirth was contagious. Even his shoulders loosened, and he allowed himself a small, quiet chuckle. "You know," she continued, leaning back in her chair, "I think this makes us a good team." Her eyes twinkled faintly, "even if I don't always admit it." Lucas hesitated, sensing both humor and honesty wrapped into her words. "We do," he agreed softly. "Though I have to warn you, I'm probably the most stubborn team member you'll ever have." "That's fine," she said, tilting her head. "I've got stubbornness covered." A quiet moment passed. Then Adriana gestured to the small conference table. "Sit." Lucas hesitated. I sit or I'll make you stay standing until the sun comes up, she teased, a hint of playful cruelty beneath the warmth. He chuckled, finally lowering himself into a chair. The act was simple, mundane, but in the quiet office it felt intimate, a subtle acknowledgement that neither was just a professional. For the next hour, they worked side by side, reviewing final calculations, catching minute errors, and occasionally teasing each other over formatting choices or phrasing. Each shared glance, each accidental touch as they reached for the same document carried a quiet thrill. Neither spoke about yesterday directly, but the connection from that moment hung between them, unspoken yet powerful. At one point, Adriana stretched, sighing. I can't remember the last time I laughed like that, properly. Not during a meeting, not at a board briefing, really laughed. Lucas looked at her, warmth in his chest. I think laughter is underrated, he said softly. It's cheap therapy for the soul. She tilted her head, considering him. Maybe you're right. Maybe I forgot that part of life exists outside spreadsheets and crisis management. The air shifted. There was no urgency, no pressure, just two people sharing a rare moment of lightness amidst the chaos of their lives. Adriana glanced at him, then at the conference room clock. You know, she murmured, almost to herself, it's strange. I feel like I can breathe a little around you. Not like yesterday when I was barely holding myself together. Just breathe. Lucas's gaze softened. I get that. I feel it too. She looked up at him fully for the first time in hours. You know, it's dangerous. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Dangerous? Getting close, feeling something, vulnerable, not in control. She smiled faintly, almost ruefully. I haven't done that in years. He reached across the table, carefully, placing a hand near hers, not touching, but close enough that the warmth from him could reach her. She didn't recoil. Instead, she let her fingers hover near his, as if acknowledging the quiet trust between them. You know, she said softly, it's weird. Yesterday, you saved me, and now I think I might like you a little more than I should. Lucas blinked, feeling a flutter of something entirely new. You don't have to say that, he said gently, but I'm glad you feel it. Her lips curved into a genuine smile, and for a moment the professional barriers fell entirely. She leaned back, stretching, and glanced out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle. It's been a long time since I felt safe or unjudged. And somehow, in one day, you made me feel both. Lucas swallowed. You deserve that, Adriana. Everyone deserves that. A quiet pause hung over them. The city hummed beyond the glass walls, cars and distant voices fading into background noise. The world had receded, leaving only two people who had survived chaos together, who had discovered a fragile bond forged in shared vulnerability. Finally, she broke the silence with a small, teasing smirk. I suppose we make a formidable duo, huh? He smiled faintly. Formidable, yes, but don't expect me to go easy on you tomorrow. She laughed softly, head tipping back, the sound lighter than it had been in years. And in that laughter, in the warmth of shared work and silent acknowledgement, the bond solidified. Fragile, tentative, yet real. A connection neither could deny, even if the world around them demanded control and composure.
The following morning, Vale Dynamics was buzzing. A client had sent an urgent complaint email blaming the corrections Lucas and Adriana had worked on the day before. The tone was harsh, accusatory, and demanded immediate accountability. Adriana stormed into the conference room, hair slightly mussed from sleep, blazer wrinkled, eyes blazing with tension. Lucas looked up, immediately sensing the storm. "What happened?" he asked cautiously. "That email," she said, slamming the printout on the table. "It's my fault. The client's furious. The board is asking why I didn't double-check everything." Her voice shook, but not with fear, anger. "And apparently, I shouldn't have trusted anyone else to handle it." Lucas's stomach sank. The client was exaggerating, yes, but Adriana's pride had been wounded. Her jaw clenched, and he noticed the tremor in her hands. Subtle, but there. "Adriana," he started, trying to intervene. "Don't," she snapped, turning sharply toward him. "Don't try to explain it away. Don't tell me it's not my fault. It's my company, my responsibility. I should have handled it myself." Lucas froze. He wanted to reach out, to remind her of yesterday, of how far she'd come. But her words were like a whip. Each syllable struck a nerve he hadn't realized was exposed. I was just..." "Just what, Lucas?" she hissed, stepping closer. "Just trying to take control away from me? Just trying to be helpful again?" The air crackled. Her eyes, wide and intense, accused him of intrusion. Her vulnerability from yesterday had hardened into suspicion and pride. I wasn't," he faltered. "I wasn't trying to..." "Yes," she shouted, voice cracking. "You're always so calm, so steady, always assuming you know best. I don't need you saving me all the time." His heart thudded painfully. Her words, meant or not, stung. Yesterday she was vulnerable, trusting, but now she had erected walls as high as the skyscrapers outside the window. "I wasn't saving you," he said quietly, hurt seeping into his tone. "I was protecting you. From yourself. From the pen. From decisions you'd regret." She flinched, but didn't look away. "From myself?" she repeated. "So I'm fragile, incompetent, incapable?" Lucas felt the sting of misunderstanding. "No, you're not incompetent. You're brilliant. I don't need compliments. I don't need pity. Don't try to tell me you understand me better than I understand myself." Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. For the first time in days, Lucas felt powerless. The woman he had helped, laughed with, and slowly connected to, was now a wall of anger and pride. Adriana's chest heaved, eyes blurred with frustration and shame. She hadn't meant to lash out, but the emotions she had tried to suppress had exploded. She had wanted to maintain control, protect herself, but in the process she had pushed away the one person who had seen her fully, who had cared without judgment. Her hand rested on the pen he had rescued, lying untouched on her desk. A sudden pang of regret cut through her pride. Did she just drive him away? Did she just ruin the fragile connection that had begun to form? For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel fear. Not of the client, not of the board, but of losing him. Lucas Bennett, the calm, steady presence, the man who had helped her when no one else could. And both of them, in their separate offices, felt the same, that yesterday's trust, today's laughter, everything they had quietly built was now fractured. The silence was deafening.
Have you ever lashed out at someone you care about because of pride or fear? How would you mend a fragile bond after a misunderstanding? The office was empty. Evening had descended, painting the city skyline in a mix of purples and golds. Lucas sat at his desk, laptop closed, staring out the window. Sophie's voice from his phone earlier still lingered in his mind,
her innocent laughter a stark contrast to the turmoil he felt inside. He thought about Adriana Vale, about yesterday, about the laughter, the closeness, the way her hand had hovered near his without fear. About today, the shouting, the accusations, the pride that had driven her away. He clenched his fists. He could walk away now, pretend nothing happened, focus solely on Sophie, protect her from the messiness of adult relationships. It would be safer, easier, less risky. But he couldn't. He thought back to the moment she had whispered, "Don't tell them, please." She had trusted him, fully, without reservation. That trust wasn't something he could ignore. That bond, even fragile, was worth fighting for. He picked up his phone and stared at her extension number, thumb hovering over the call button. Pride whispered, "Don't reach out. She'll push you away again." Heart whispered, "She needs you, and you need her." Lucas exhaled and dialed. Meanwhile, in her office, Adriana sat slumped against the edge of her desk, staring at the city below. The pen, the one he had rescued, rested on the surface before her like a symbol of yesterday's vulnerability. She had been strong, unyielding, proud, but inside, she felt the emptiness of pushing someone she had begun to care about away. She thought of Lucas, calm, steady, unwavering, the man who had saved her from herself, who had stayed close without judgment, who had made her feel human again. She wanted to tell him she was sorry, wanted to tell him that pride had won for a moment, but her heart couldn't stop whispering that she needed him too. She exhaled sharply and picked up her phone. The decision was hers, pride or vulnerability, retreat or truth. The line connected. "Lucas?" Her voice was tentative, almost unsure. "Adriana?" he said softly. She held up a hand. "No, let me. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lashed out. You were trying to help, and I overreacted." Lucas felt relief wash over him, but he didn't smile immediately. "I'm glad you said that, because I couldn't stay away. I couldn't ignore what happened. What's between us matters. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to." Her throat worked, emotions catching in her words. "I want that too, but I'm scared. Scared of letting someone in, of being vulnerable again, scared of getting hurt or losing control." "I get that," he said, voice calm and steady. "But some things are worth the risk. You are worth the risk." There was a pause, a long, trembling pause. Then she whispered, "Lucas, would you come up to my office, please?" He hesitated. The rational part of him warned that this could be awkward, that pride could flare again. But the emotional part, the part that had connected with her, laughed with her, protected her, overrode caution. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. 10 minutes later, Lucas walked into her office. Adriana was standing near the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. The distance between them was small, but heavy with everything unsaid. He approached slowly, and she didn't flinch, not this time. Lucas began, then stopped, searching for words that could carry the weight of their shared experiences. She held up a hand gently, stopping him. No words, just stay. He nodded and stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence without touching her. Silence enveloped them, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was calm, healing.
After a long moment, she spoke softly, almost to herself. Yesterday, today, you reminded me what it's like to feel seen, to feel human, to feel safe. Lucas turned slightly, meeting her gaze. You're not fragile, Adriana. You're human, and you don't have to face everything alone. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Pride still lingered, but it softened under the steady presence of someone who had chosen to stay. I want to trust you, she whispered. You can, and I'll be here, not to control, not to fix, but to stand with you, always. The tension that had fractured their bond began to melt. Walls lowered, fear retreated, vulnerability became a bridge instead of a barrier. Finally, Adriana stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders brushed, close enough that the city lights framed their faces. Adriana, she murmured. Yes. I'm ready to try, she whispered. To trust again. To let this us exist. Lucas reached out slowly, brushing a stray hair from her face. You don't have to be afraid, he said gently. She smiled softly, a real, unguarded smile. Not with you. And in that moment, both understood. The choice to be vulnerable, to reconnect, had won. Pride and fear had lost. The city outside glimmered, indifferent to their quiet victory. But inside that office, two hearts had chosen to take a chance on each other, and on love.
The city skyline glimmered with 1,000 lights, reflecting off the glass towers like scattered stars. Lucas stepped into Adriana Vale's office again, later in the evening, the air charged not with tension, but with quiet anticipation. The previous day's misunderstandings, the shouting, the walls of pride, they were gone, replaced by something fragile yet unbreakable. Adriana sat near the window, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the lights below. When she saw him enter, she smiled, a full, genuine smile, free of pretense. You came, she said softly. I promised, Lucas replied, closing the door behind him. He felt the weight of every word, every choice, every moment that had brought them here. They stood in silence for a moment, simply observing each other, the calm after the storm. It was a silence that no longer carried unspoken tension. It carried understanding, trust, and a quiet exhilaration of rediscovered connection. I want to start over, Adriana whispered, not as CEO and employee, not as anyone pretending, just us, honestly, without walls. Lucas smiled, a small but warm expression that reached his eyes. I've been waiting for that, he said, and I'm ready if you are. She nodded, a tear glistening on her cheek, though she quickly brushed it away. I am. He stepped closer. Neither spoke for a moment, letting the distance between them shrink, the city lights framing their figures like witnesses to their reconciliation. Finally, he reached out, gently placing a hand over hers. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. For the first time in weeks, both allowed themselves to breathe fully. The laughter from yesterday, the shared vulnerability, the forced proximity. They had all built up to this moment, and now it felt like they could truly exhale. I can't believe I let pride get in the way, Adriana said softly. I was so afraid of being weak, of losing control, that I nearly drove you away. And you didn't leave. Not once. I'm not going anywhere, Lucas said firmly, his voice steady and calm, carrying the reassurance she so desperately needed. Her eyes softened, glistening with emotion. You've changed me, Lucas.
made me remember that being human isn't a weakness, and that trusting someone can be the strongest thing you do. He squeezed her hand gently. And you've changed me too. Taught me that even when I think I'm protecting someone, sometimes I need to let them see me. Flaws, doubts, everything. That's what makes trust real. Adriana tilted her head, studying him. So, this is real then? He nodded, a small, genuine smile spreading across his face. It's real, and it's worth protecting. Slowly, carefully, she leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching. The city lights reflected in her eyes. Lucas, I love that you were here. Every moment. Even when I didn't know it. Even when I wanted to push you away. He smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. I love that you let me stay. That you let me in. That you trusted me. For a long moment, the world outside ceased to exist. No emails, no board meetings, no deadlines. Just Lucas, Adriana, and the quiet hum of the city. Their hands intertwined, their breaths synchronized, and their hearts aligned in a way that words could not fully capture. Tomorrow, Adriana whispered, we start again. Together. Together. Lucas echoed, a promise and a vow in the single word. Later that evening, Lucas returned home to Sophie, who had been waiting anxiously. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, running into his arms. I laughed, hugging her tightly. "Hey, kiddo! Miss me?" Sophie giggled. "You're late! But you look happy. Really happy." Lucas smiled, ruffling her hair. "I am. And you know why?" Sophie grinned, sensing the shift in the air, even without knowing the details. "Because of Mommy?" she asked, teasing. "No, Sophie," he winked. "Because I found someone who makes life feel lighter, safer, and it feels like home." Sophie's eyes sparkled. "I like her already." Lucas laughed, holding her close. "You'll like her a lot more when you meet her tomorrow." He tucked Sophie into bed that night, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. As he turned off her lamp, he thought of Adriana, their reconciliation, the choice to trust, the first sparks of a love that had begun amidst chaos and misunderstanding. He allowed himself to feel hope, real hope, not the fragile kind that wavers with circumstances, but the kind that anchors the heart. Next morning, Lucas returned to Vale Dynamics with a spring in his step. Adriana met him in the lobby, radiant and composed, yet approachable. She held a small coffee cup, handing it to him with a playful smirk. "Good morning, partner," she said softly. Lucas took it, smiling. "Morning, partner. Ready for today?" She nodded. "Always, especially with you by my side." Their laughter mingled in the lobby, warm and genuine, a contrast to the tense mornings before. The office staff noticed it too. Something had shifted. The once formal, controlled CEO and the quiet, steady single dad now shared a bond that was visible, undeniable, and inspiring. By mid-morning, Lucas and Adriana found a quiet moment in the conference room. No spreadsheets, no deadlines, just them. "I've been thinking," Adriana said, her voice soft, playful, yet full of sincerity, "that maybe we can teach each other a few things. I can show you the ropes of the corporate world, and you can teach me how to not take everything so seriously." Lucas laughed. "Deal. Though, I'm warning you, I'm a slow learner when it comes to office politics. And I'm a slow learner when it comes to letting people in," she admitted. He smiled, reaching for her hand once more. "Then we'll learn together." And in that moment, everything felt aligned. The misunderstandings, the crises, the fear and pride, they were all part of the journey that had led them here. Lucas Bennett, the devoted single dad, and Adriana Vale, the brilliant, guarded CEO, had chosen each other. Love had won, trust had triumphed, and a new chapter had begun.
Have you ever taken a risk to trust someone after being hurt? How did it feel to open your heart again? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you for watching another story of Lucas Bennett to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as wild and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so subscribe. Lucas and I will be waiting for you tomorrow.